My name is Naledi Pandor, and I wish to begin by acknowledging this Council for its adoption of Resolution 2492 just a few moments ago. We're absolutely thrilled at the unanimity that was indicated in that adoption. I am told that this is a welcome return to consensus in the Council, and we're extremely pleased at that. Should women choose to use that particular aspect of reproductive rights, it is their right to make that choice, and this is recognized worldwide. It can't be that I'm a victim of sexual violence and I cannot make a choice as to my body and my reproductive rights. I don't think we're doing enough to understand the factors that relate to the practice and levels of violence that we see in many of our societies. We need, through improved research, to have a deeper understanding of the causal factors and to attack these in order to ensure that we end the scourge of violence against women. We appeal to the Security Council and the international community to support the government of Burundi and the East African Community mediation process to lay the foundation for an environment that is conducive to the holding of democratic elections, to support a peaceful transfer of power in order to ensure peace and stability beyond 2020.
Please join us at the lectern, Madam President, Madam Ambassador, Madam Minister.
That's a very scary introduction. Fortunately, I've never been an ambassador and have no intention of becoming one. You're required to be far too polite for my character. The meeting is now adjourned.
So a flurry of diplomacy from South Africa's chief diplomat over the past week here in New York, leading us to the conclusion of South Africa's presidency, which will end at midnight Eastern time here on the East Coast in the United States. My guest in studio here at our office in the United Nations is none other than International Relations Minister and for Cooperation as well, Minister Dr. Naledi Pandor. Nice to have you back, Minister.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
So, we're almost at the end, right? So what's your analysis? What are some of your takeaways, having been at the helm of this council now for the past month? Tapping yourself on the shoulder, on the back, or not?
Well, I think there have been some very good moments, and all credit is due to our team at DIRCO on the multilateral desk, as well as our permanent representative, Ambassador Machila, and his team in New York. I think South Africa has acquitted itself well. I'm particularly pleased at the adoption of the resolution on women, peace and security, which was by unanimous agreement of all member states that are members of the Security Council. We had some ups and downs with formulations in the resolution, but in the end, we had agreement.
Let's talk a bit then about that resolution, Resolution 2492 on women, peace and security, as you called it, a return to consensus in the Council. This was, of course, a resolution that sought to build on that historic resolution in 2013-25 that really, for the first time, placed the gender perspective at the center of conflict resolution efforts here at the United Nations. And yet the broad consensus that I'm getting, Minister, is that this resolution did not particularly break new ground. What's your response to that?
Well, I think what the resolution has done and the process leading to its adoption is to strongly bring back the agenda of women, peace and security into the Security Council, certainly, and I think broadly into the United Nations. The fact of the presence of women who have been involved in conflict, either as survivors or as peacekeepers, was a very important contribution by South Africa to giving character and life to the debate on the resolution. And I think once the members began to hear from these women and men, they developed a realistic appreciation of the need for us to more seriously attend to this matter and look at whether we could agree on strengthening the resolution to focus much more on implementation and on reporting requirements.
That is the big takeaway, is the question of implementation. This is where 1325 has failed, is that it hasn't been implemented. How do you foresee the implementation of 2492?
Well, in terms of implementation of 1325, there are countries that indicate that they have taken aspects of it, certainly, very seriously. You have seen more women in peacekeeping missions. You've seen much more attention to ensuring that there is increased recognition of the need to provide support specifically to women for needs that might not always be recognized in conflict situations. So the reports we got from various countries showed that parliaments across the world have attempted to respond to 1325, but the fact of ongoing conflict, the fact of women being victims and having to be survivors clearly indicates much more needs to be done. And I think what the additions that South Africa proposed have done, and we thank, by the way, the United Kingdom as penholder for having really played an important role in securing the level of consensus that was achieved.
And of course this is part of a broader push ahead of the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform of Action next year and the 20th anniversary of 1325. Minister, the Institute for Security Studies produced an analysis just this week of South Africa's tenure as President of the Council. Quote, numerous analysts in New York and South Africa told the Institute for Security Studies that the country could have articulated its priorities more clearly over the past months. South Africa's stated priorities didn't always materialize through the country's interventions on the Council and its broader diplomatic efforts in New York. So quite a critique from the Institute for Security Studies. I wonder how you respond to that.
Well, I find the article interesting because it begins with that, but then the rest of the content indicates that South Africa pursued the priorities that it had set. And obviously, the article was written before this week because all the matters that were deliberated upon this week, the various roundtables that we had, the unanimous adoption of the resolution where the article assumes the resolution is being rejected, clearly indicate that the critique might not be, as accurate as one would wish. Of course, we haven't achieved everything.
One of the things,
that we wished for,
that you didn't achieve was this effort led by South Africa as part of the Africa Group in the Council to get UN-assessed contributions to fund AU peace operations on the continent. Of course, there was a lot of lobbying in Washington. I know Ambassador Machila and various South African diplomats spent a lot of time engaging with UN counterparts, and of course, the PSC, the AU Peace and Security Council, withdrew its support for this resolution, so it hasn't been tabled as yet. What do you make of South Africa's engagement and the process that unfolded relating to that
My
resolution?
understanding was that the PSC felt that we need to have acceptance of the resolution and approval by the Ministerial Council, the Executive Council, and then by the summit in February. So it's something we must continue to pursue. And I think within the broad membership of the General Assembly, we need to continue to seek to persuade that there must be a funding support for peacekeeping missions.
Does it not also speak, Minister, to the lack of consensus that we find among African states themselves?
Well, maybe we need to caucus better. We need to ensure that we do build consensus. But I think all of Africa would support the intentions of the work that South Africa undertook. And we will continue, given our focus on silencing the guns, to argue for dedicated support for peacekeeping on the African continent, because we believe it's imperative.
I'm going to return to the question of silencing the guns. Of course, this deadline of 2020 will be during your chairmanship of the African Union. I want to touch on what happened in the Security Council yesterday. The vote on renewing the mandate for the UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara. South Africa and Russia abstained. It passed, the resolution passed with 13 members supporting. South Africa and Russia abstained over concerns that the text was not balanced and that it again failed to move this file forward. Morocco's ambassador has been on record, Minister, that the referendum for the Sahrawi self-determination is, quote, dead. And this is a view that appears to be gaining traction within the Council, particularly vis-a-vis Morocco's call for greater autonomy but not full independence. What do you make of this dynamic in the Council?
Well, South Africa stands with the people of Sahrawi. Clearly, we believe that they deserve freedom and full enjoyment of human rights, which we now enjoy in South Africa. And so we stand in solidarity with them. We cannot support any resolution that seeks to ignore the existence of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic and its call for legitimate freedom. So any resolution that neglects their position in society and their organization Polisario is a resolution we would not be able to support.
It also raises questions about the procedures of the Security Council. The United States is the penholder on Western Sahara, and my understanding is that the draft resolution was shared with a group of friends of Western Sahara, which includes no African country. The United States, France, Russia, the UK, all part of this group of friends, Spain, but not a single African country. I mean, what does that tell us?
Well, it's most peculiar not to have Africa have sight of such a resolution, given that Morocco is a member state of the African Union.
Input.
We found the whole process totally unacceptable, and it's for that reason that we could not support it. We also think you can't have resolutions that seek to erase existing resolutions, because the General Assembly has not changed its position on the referendum. We have a standing resolution on that, and it should be acted upon.
I spoke to the representative of Polisario yesterday, their representative to New York, and he made the point that they feel that the UN has moved back towards a business as usual approach on Western Sahara, and that they will make a decision at their Congress in December as to whether they resume the take-up of arms in terms of this conflict. They say that the ceasefire was based on the promise of a referendum. The Moroccans and many members of the Council are saying there will be no referendum. Where do we go from here? Are we going back to war?
Well, one is getting from members of Polisario an increasing sense of, not being acknowledged or taken seriously. And I think a return to conflict would be most tragic, and we as member states should do all that we can. We certainly from our side, within the AU, must do more to encourage a resolution of this issue. I think it's in our interest as the African Union to work hard at ensuring we don't have a return to arms.
Morocco is now a member of the African Union. It was
readmitted.
So
it
what
is,
has happened
and the
since
matter
that?
of Sahrawi is on the agenda of the African Union. There has been a resolution at the AU level that there be an independent site visit to the Arab Democratic Republic, in order for the African Union to get a report from an in situ inspection. This has not been agreed to by Morocco. The independent assessment team that was to visit has not yet undertaken that exercise. We need to continue pushing for that. I think Morocco really must know that it should work very closely with Polisario and arrive at an outcome that is accepted in world terms and that does not continue to have part of Africa being colonized.
Minister, we have about
territory.
3 minutes left, and I want to pack as much into that as possible. The Israeli-Palestinian question, right? That was also on the agenda this past month. And as we all know, the stalemate continues while we await the peace plan to be produced, the long-awaited peace plan to be produced by the United States. Does South Africa still see the United States as an honest broker in terms of this conflict, given some of the unilateral decisions we have seen from the administration of President Donald Trump?
Well, I don't know whether one would say honest or dishonest, but clearly it has moved away from accepted positions of the United Nations, which are accepted by all member states of the UN. And clearly any move away from agreed positions, such as the position of Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, and so on, doesn't render you as being faithful to what has been decided by this multilateral body. And that therefore means it's very difficult for us to believe we have a trusted interlocutor in this process. So I am deeply concerned about the lack of progress with respect to the Palestinian question, concerned primarily because of the very deeply troubling humanitarian situation. And I think South Africa needs to look at whether there are steps it can take in order to encourage dialogue, both between the PLO as well as Hamas, but also whether it can bring all the parties together to initiate a dialogue that might lead us to a different position from the one of status quo that we're at.
And the dialogue you mentioned that is needed between Hamas and the PLO, of course, is very important for Palestinian
unity is vital.
Absolutely.
Because if you are not coming to the table with a shared perspective, it's even very difficult for us as your friends to know how we best assist you.
So Palestinian unity, very key. I was going to touch on the 2020 silencing the guns, but I'm being told to wrap, so I want to get to this question, Minister. Springbok captain Siya Kolisi will lead the national team for the 50th time when they face England in the Rugby World Cup in Japan on Saturday morning here, morning in South Africa. Of course, the first black captain of a Springbok team ever. What do you make of this moment, given what we experienced in 1995? Is South Africa in need of a 1995 moment on Saturday?
Well, South Africa is in need of the Rugby World Cup. That's what we want. So we want Siya to bring it home. And what we'd say is go Bokke. I'm wearing green because tomorrow I'll be flying, so I won't be able to have my green on. And, all power to the Springboks.
But in terms of rugby as a unit, do you see that?
I think all sports plays a very, very important role in social cohesion, in drawing a nation together. And you can see how South Africa has been enthused. I think there was a sense of, perhaps a lack of confidence as we got to the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
But once we got to the semis, you got the idea that South Africans said maybe.
Well, we haven't lost a Rugby World
moment,
Cup final, and we've played in 2 before, so hopefully three's a charm.
We are
right.
Anticipating with bated breath.
Minister, pleasure. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be with you in New York.
Dr. Naledi Pandor is South Africa's chief diplomat, the Minister for International Relations and Cooperation, speaking to us now at the almost conclusion of South Africa's presidency of the UN Security Council. And let me echo what the Minister said, go Bokke. We'll take a break. The Full View continues right after this.